Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, your co-host. I'm a longtime journalist, having produced stories for ABC News, CBS News, CNN, and NBC News. I love meeting interesting people and having thought-provoking conversations. That's exactly what we do in each episode of A San Francisco Conservative. And I'd love for you to meet my co-host, the author of A San Francisco Conservative, the book, as well as Income and Wealth and Rome 476, his latest book. Author David Parker, right here in San Francisco. Welcome, David. How are you?
Fine, Tom. How are
Great.
you today, Tom?
I'm doing very well. I
Yeah.
wish I was there in San Francisco. I got to visit not long ago and had a great time. Got to hear your jazz band, and I love it there, have to say. So we'll have to schedule another visit. But I wanted to talk about we're into a fresh new year, and it's a election year. And I know that many of your essays relate to history and government, the work of our founding fathers, and also I think you've been known to skewer the progressives every once in a while. What are your thoughts as another election year gets underway?
I have the big view of things. So I see everything we're doing as having happened in the past and nothing to worry about. We have a Congress that's functioning on a pretty low level. The dialogue is at a low level. What they propose for legislation is at a low level. And neither party has any plan of any intention of solving the problems this nation really cares about. And you wouldn't know by looking at Congress that this is a very moderate nation. We are not a crazy people. You wouldn't know that by looking at Congress. Congress is way left and way right, and they fight each other because our voting districts are so gerrymandered that a liberal only runs against liberals. And so who wins? The most liberal. And same with conservative. The most conservative wins, and then they get together in Congress and they don't get together because they're fighting each other. But in fact, that's not who the nation is. And
Yeah.
and as a person who has been very successful in business, I'll tell you that people in business, like me, are not particularly interested in politics. We give equally to each party. People in business are not Democrat or liberal or conservative. They're indifferent.
Yeah. No, I know you've extensively studied American history, the founding of this nation and democracy, which is such a unique and precious creation. How do you think our political system is doing, as it's evolved from those early days of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence?
It's actually another reason I'm not interested in politics. I write on political economy from an entrepreneurial mind and from a historical mind, so my writing is really interesting. But I'm not interested personally because I believe the founding fathers got it right. They just didn't invent our Constitution, which is only one page, just a few rules. There's nothing to even talk about. It's general. A group of geniuses, I don't know, 100 of them, I'm not sure how many, 90 or 100 of them for 3 or 4 months sat at the Philadelphia, and they looked closely at everything that was good about 5th century Athens and 1st century Rome and their own 18th century age of enlightenment, and pulled out the best law on one page, like the Ten Commandments. It's one page. It's a pinnacle,
Yeah.
and it brought this nation did well. It said it was almost freedom from government is what they had in mind. You're on your own. America was historically a country of very responsible people. That is the essence of what Alexis de Tocqueville said in 1835. There's no nation in the world like America in terms of responsibility. Farmers in Europe are not reading the newspaper and discussing international events. But you can go to a log cabin in Kentucky, someone's got the paper and he's arguing with his neighbor about what's happening in Israel. or something like that. That
Amazing.
doesn't exist anywhere. And de Tocqueville says, page 1, America, get rid of slavery. You are out of your mind. What are you doing? Because once you do, you are about to become the greatest nation on the world ever. And we flipped that in 1933 with the New Deal, and we don't seem to be able to go back. And I'm saying that's what all the argument, left and right, red and blue, is all about. Should we go back to the founding fathers, or are we moving forward? That's called progressivism. Are we moving forward from a pinnacle? I believe any step forward from a pinnacle is down. There's no, you don't move up from a pinnacle.
Yeah, yeah. And in a minute, I'd love to hear about some of the early influences again that influenced the well, we can touch on it now, actually. You've gone backward, and backward again to some of the early influences that our founding forefathers studied in when they all got together to create this nation. Can you touch on that a little bit? I know you've written about that, and I love that quality about your books.
But to keep it simple, our Constitution says that Congress will be elected, not appointed. And if they don't do a good job, poof, they're thrown out of office. And Congress people are only for 2 years. And only Congress shall make laws, not the president, not the Supreme Court, and certainly not administrative agencies like Environmental Protection Agency or Department of Education. They don't make laws. They carry out Congress's wishes, but Congress makes the laws. And that's kind of reversed. And so what they got from Rome, which I thought they got from Montesquieu, 18th century France, was the bicameral legislature. It comes from Rome. Cicero, he says, if you don't have one branch of government, it can be a small branch like our Senate, 100 is made of people who are kind of wealthy or who are great industrialists who are actually making the country operate economically. If you exclude them or just make them no different than anybody else, your government's going to fail in the long run. You have to just give them a voice to the very wealthy and very powerful. Not a big voice, but a voice. Then the House of Representatives is 435 or whatever the number is, or 335, and they're from the people. The people get 3-4 times as many voices as the Senate but if you don't do that, your government's going to fail. And our founding fathers grasped that.
Great structure that has endured all these years.
And it's endured, yes.
In just a minute. This is a San Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, and along with my co-host, author David Parker. This is a San Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, your co-host, longtime journalist. I love meeting interesting, thought-provoking people, and that certainly includes my co-host, author David Parker, right there in San Francisco. David is the author of Income and Wealth, the San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476. And David, we were talking about the founding fathers and this remarkable achievement. Our Constitution on one single page And I'm just curious if you think it, and I kind of know the answer here, but I was just curious if you think that that one page anticipated all the developments that could come. I mean, people are talking now about artificial intelligence and you know, travel to Mars or what have you. I mean, do you think it really is a document that anticipated anything that might come up?
Absolutely. That is one of its great strengths. It's written to be general. The founding fathers said, we don't know what's going to come up in the future. We can't possibly. We don't know about abortion. We don't know about gay marriage. That's not on our mind. And so it's a general document, and they kept it general on purpose. The states are to make most laws, and that's how. That's the reason that abortion was canceled. That it's not up to the Supreme Court to decide that abortion is okay at 12 months, but it's not okay at 13. It's not, and it's not okay at 14. We can't decide that, and that may change with future science. Every state, wherever you live, will make that decision. And if you don't like that state, you move to another state. That was called federalism. The states have a lot of power, and that's how it was designed. Congress was given enumerated powers. There's only a few. They can have a post office. They can run a navy, a few things. Everything else, that's the only way they could get the South to sign onto the Constitution. The states really were like little independent countries. That's how they saw themselves. And they, even today, you think that they're independent countries. You know, the Mormons were hassled wherever they were. And they said, okay, we're out of here. We're moving to Utah, and we're going to make Utah a Mormon state. And if you don't like it, don't come to Utah, and we won't come bother you. But that's a very American approach to solving problems.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that our representatives have continued to honor that idea? I mean, some people feel that government is invasive in our lives right now. I mean, I'm just curious how that has evolved over the years. What do you think?
Well, the civil rights movement said some states, like the South, with their Jim Crow laws, that won't be abolished unless the federal government steps in. And there's some truth to that. I'm a civil rights activist from the 60s. I'm only conservative on fiscal things, not on social or political. But that's the only thing where I think government really belongs, is to protect civil rights. And if it's not happening statewide, step in and make sure it's happening. That's what the government is for. It protects social, political, economic freedom, protect life, liberty, and property, but not provide life, liberty, and property. If you don't have a job, that's okay. We'll send you a check. We have a little disease in the nation. Don't have to go to work. We'll send you as much money as you need for as long as you need. That's not what government is supposed to do. Government can loan people money, put it on their 1040 income tax. You pay it back over 20 years, $1,000, $2,000 a year, whatever it is. That's fine, but don't just give it away. It's not the government's job, not to solve our problems.
Do you think? I mean, we're kind of coming out of it now, thank goodness, or at least that's my impression. But over the past 3 or 4 years, we were wrestling with the pandemic. You know, the coronavirus. Uh, what do you think of our government in terms of how things were handled during that chapter of history?
The financial crisis, 2008, the government bailed out all these banks. That was the right thing to do because you can't lose your financial system. The country will collapse. But the government says, you don't pay us back, we're taking your bank. We're taking all your customers, all your business. And boy, all those loans were paid back, and taxpayers made a lot of money on that deal. Government bailed them out. So we have a natural catastrophe like a pandemic, and people can't work because they can't leave their house. And if they need help, government, okay, that's a good use of government. They'll help you. You pay it back, though. Then if people knew they had to pay it back, you'd be surprised how many wouldn't have taken some of that money.
Yeah,
because many people were doing very well at home. They could work, but working from home, they didn't need that money, but they were taking it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Trillions and trillions of dollars they were taking.
Amazing. Yeah. And you'd mentioned the banks, and I can't pass up this opportunity to ask you about, right there, kind of in your neighborhood, Silicon Valley, the Silicon Valley Bank. There was some concern about kind of a widespread ripple effect. Do you have an opinion about what happened there with that banking situation?
Yeah, two things happened. Well, no, the main thing that happened is they were distracted. They were doing stuff that bankers shouldn't be doing that was imposed a little bit, not by law, but it's, they were considering environmental factors. They were considering good governance and disinvesting here and there, and perhaps supporting startups here and there, uh, doing a community service that way, that they could make money doing all these things. And they got distracted, and they gambled tons of money on treasury bonds because they were paying high interest when interest rates were really low at the time. And there was nobody there to pay attention to that and say interest rates can rise at any moment. If we do that, we're going to be wiped out. And sure enough, rates rose, and Silicon Valley Bank and one of my banks, First Republic, one of my banks, got wiped out. They just gambled. There's nobody there watching the ship. And there's a big argument against corporations doing all kinds of stuff except paying attention to making a profit. And that's Milton Friedman's argument. That's their job. That if a corporation wants to give in any way to the community, employees and individuals as CEOs, they can give, but not the corporation, not at the expense of taxpayers, at the expense of watching the vote.
Yeah, that was a good
That's what
point.
happens if you get distracted.
Yeah, yeah, a good point. Well, we'll pick up on that in a moment. This is the San Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, and along with my co-host, author David Parker, author of Income and Wealth, a San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476, we will continue. This is a San Francisco Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, your co-host, longtime journalist, joined by co-host, author David Parker there in San Francisco. David is the author of Income and Wealth, a San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476. David, we were just talking about people worried about a possible banking collapse and so on, and you get into poor decision making and running fiscal risks and so on. And I know there's an excellent story that people will enjoy hearing about why there's a picture of the Roman Colosseum or the ruins of the Roman Colosseum on the cover of your new book, and why you chose to title it Rome 476. Can you share that with us?
Well, the Huns came into Rome in 476, not with swords, with sledgehammers, and they sledgehammered that city to smithereens. The Forum, the Senate, their White House, Supreme Court, and the Colosseum was so huge that the fourth wall, they ran out of energy. They couldn't knock that fourth wall down. The windows, they knocked them out, but there's no, or not windows, but there's, and just pretend that's Washington, D.C. And they knocked everything down, but they left one wall of the Lincoln Memorial or something like that. They just ran out of steam. Think of Washington, D.C. as dust. And Rome had the biggest military of the world at the time. And they sat on their swords and didn't lift a finger and let the Huns come in there and smash it to pieces. And my question is, well, why? The answer is they hadn't been paid. The next question, why? All tax revenue, and there was a lot of tax revenue. Well, Rome was a wealthy operation, went to service interest on the debt. Then I walk away to another subject. Let the reader think about that for a second.
Yeah, I guess it's like they say in show business, right? Mic drop. It's like, oh, the debt. We can relate to that right now, as a matter of fact. Yeah. So, well, this is an election year, and are you concerned by the direction we're going? I mean, I know you've commented on certain political leaders and representatives and so on, and certain uh, you know politicians giving us anything we want to hear, like free college and unlimited health care. And I mean, what are your thoughts this election year?
I'm not worried about America because unlike Europe, which has the euro, so France just can't print euros. Germany just can't print euros. They have to get their act together. But America, we can print dollars. We have the mimeograph machine. That's an old school teacher talking. We just run off the lesson. We can run off the money. So we're we can save ourselves just by inflation. But it's not a good idea to spend so much more than we're taking in. And we have Social Security. Nobody wants to cut Social Security, but it's there's no money in Social Security. It was designed so Congress could never touch that money. So people who are working are paying for those who are retired. It goes right on through. It's not sitting in the bank account. There's at least twice as many people retired than are working. So that's going to have to change. They're going to have to double the Social Security tax. We're paying 15% now, 7.5% employer, 7.5% employee, but that's the employer's taking your money and giving it to you. That's going to have to go to 20 or 25%, or maybe they're going to have to pay less because the money is not there. And you can't it's just wrong to keep doing it forever. I was in Greece in 2010, I believe, and that was the Euro crisis. And people were wondering how Greece was going to pay their sovereign debt. They didn't have the money. And at the end, they cut Social Security in half for the whole nation. So there's precedent for that. I was there in a kitchen with school teachers, and they got their checks. They opened it up right in front of me, and they all laughed because they said we had no right to get that much Social Security. Wow. Politicians have been running for years. Vote for me, and I'll raise your Social Security. Okay, that sounds good to me. Wow. And then they took it away, and nobody really objected. So our Social Security is paying out way too much. It's paying out at an 8% rate when the most it can get is 4% on money. It's complete, and cost of living is thrown in there. We did that during the Nixon years when there was so much money coming in, nobody cared. But now we don't have that money coming in. And Medicare, what we're paying is this. We're not paying very much for Medicare, but we're getting a real lot from Medicare.
You mentioned, aside from costs and debt and inflation and so on, you mentioned a word that caught my attention. To be more specific, a name. You'd mentioned Nixon, and I was just wondering. I can't resist saying that reminds me a little bit of Trump. And do you think our democracy can survive some of these questionable, if I may say so, questionable leaders Really, in my view, I guess I'm more liberal here. We call the show a San Francisco conservative, but I just can't help but be concerned about the actions of a president. Do you think our democracy can survive really anyone who holds that office?
Yeah, the democracy will survive. The nation's gonna might be in chaos. The Trump said he didn't care how much debt we had for the nation. At that, when he was in office, interest rates were almost like less than zero. You could borrow forever. There was no payments to make. There was no interest on the debt. So my Roman Colosseum would have fell on deaf ears. But now interest rates are higher, and they may come down, but they're not going to come down that much.
Yeah.
And if they go up because of inflation or any reason, our debt is 33 or 4 trillion, but we take in about 3 or 4 trillion in tax revenue.
Yeah.
So what if interest rates rose to 10%? That would be 3 or 4 trillion. And that's what our interest is, and that's what our revenue is. There's nothing for services, nothing for the Pentagon, nothing for Social Security.
So we might have a replay of that illustration on the cover of your
Yeah,
latest, the Roman Colosseum there.
we won't, but I'm just saying it's wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
And my other big message of wrong is that the founding fathers, I believe, got it right.
Well, let's talk about that in a minute. This is a San Francisco
All right.
Conservative. I'm Tom Martin, co-host, and along with my co-host, author David Parker. This is a San Francisco Conservative. I'm co-host Tom Martin, longtime journalist, along with my co-host, author David Parker. And we were just talking about a, I don't know if it's a parable or corollary, or at least a historical precedent and example of what happened in Rome in the year 476 with the destruction of the Colosseum and really everything beautiful in that amazing advanced culture, and how that hopefully will serve as a warning of some things taking place in present day. So, David, what in this election year, what should people be thinking about some of those promises that we're hearing from politicians, free college and so on?
Well, 1933, the New Deal, government says we're going to help solve problems of the nation. If you're out of work, we'll put you to work. We'll have projects, and we'll tax the rich. I don't know how we're going to do this, or we'll just borrow to pay for it if we can't do that.
Actually, taxing the rich sounds like a pretty good idea.
And the rich, we have all read Robin Hood. We know you're coming. You can't tax the rich. You can't get it from them, and you can't tax the poor because they don't have any money. So all taxes are paid for by the middle class, and they should be raised to at least 50%, maybe 70%. We should send the middle class, 95% of the nation, back to the Middle Ages, and that will solve our problems.
If we have time travel, hopefully one day we will have time travel, and then we'll see the consequences, and so on. But
my wife is a designer; she can make some robes for everybody, and my son is a woodworker; he'll make canes and.
Perfect. Yes, exactly. Well,
very self-serving on my part here. All right.
That's funny. Well, just in maybe 1 minute, maybe you can share with our audience the value of your books. I mean, I know why I value them as a journalist, because I've been conditioned to just look at present day, present day, present day, and you know, no historical context whatsoever. But I'd love to hear you talk about that for just a minute.
Well, human beings are not doing anything different than they've ever done. If you read the ancient Greek 5th century Athens and you read 1st century Rome, if I read it out loud to you and didn't tell you who wrote it, you would go, that's interesting. Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. But I tell you, this was written 3,000 years ago, you would say, I don't believe it. But they talk like us. They think like us. They had the same problems, and their solutions were actually more creative than our solutions. We should be looking to the past. And
Yeah.
one of the reasons of Rome's success is the government didn't provide for people. You're on your own.
Well, there's so many important historical examples in your books. 3 books of excellent essays. I know you meticulously researched them, and they're so well thought out, and they really open our eyes as readers. So, bravo for great writing there, David. And people can certainly visit your website, your website, davidparkeressays.com, and they will find information and the opportunity to purchase your books, Income and Wealth, A San Francisco Conservative, and Rome 476, right there on your website or on Amazon. So thanks, David. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Okay, my pleasure. It's fun.